to find the flight time of a projectile launched off of a cliff is the most difficult. I like this question. I like this question. Well, example 10 is going to be, I like this question, I like this question, I like this question. There are several strategies. You could find how long it takes to get to the top by letting Vy final be 0 at the top. Then start the question over, let Vy initial be 0, figure out how long it takes to fall from that height, and add them up. That would give you total time. Or could do it all at once. Or you could find time to the top, double it, that would give you the time to get back here, and then figure out how long it took to fall the rest of the way. Don't recommend that. I prefer strategy 2. Let's do it all at once. Why not? Now, to do it all at once is going to require the quadratic formula. Nope, I lied. If you have a solver, it's going to require the quadratic formula because that is the cleanest, fastest, nicest way. Or if you're just really good at the quadratic formula, you can use the quadratic formula. But I will show you a method of doing it all at once that doesn't require the quadratic formula, but it does require uber caution. See, I love working with German. Extra caution. Example 10. Find the flight time. Because I did say to you that most of the time we're going to spend is going to be finding time of flight. How much room did I give you? Okay, time to top, find the range. So flight time I got to do on this page. Check. Is this a projectile? Everybody say yes. Yes. So what am I going to do? I tell you before I do anything else because I want to feel better. I'm going to go boom, boom, horizontal, vertical. There's my t-table. Oh, not only that. Do you remember the two no-brainers? And I don't like calling them that because you need to know some physics, but hopefully now that you know the physics, there was two things I said you could write right away, one on each column. Yes. AX equals, Clay?
0.
Yes. And AY equals? Okay. I do that anytime they give me a projectile, except in the previous two questions, I'd already typed out the t-table for you. So far, so good? Don't you feel better? It's no longer blank. You've started it. What else? Look at the velocity in the picture. Slanty? Yeah? Well, then what should I do? I'm looking for a word that begins with letter C and rhymes with components. Components. Okay, I can't call that a no-brainer, but I'm telling you, I refuse to deal with slanty. Let's break it up. So I'm going to go, there's Vx, there's Vy initial. Why did I put an initial on the Vy, but not on the x? Vx. Any chance I get to reinforce to myself, horizontal acceleration is 0, Vx initial is Vx final, is Vx middle, is Vx, that is Vx. Vy is going to change. Let's do the trig. That 50, opposite adjacent or hypotenuse. Hypotenuse. That Vy, opposite adjacent or hypotenuse. Well, I guess opposite or adjacent. Opposite. And what about Vx? Hey, let's find Vx first. Which trig function? Cos of, what's the angle? 30 degrees equals adjacent over hypotenuse. How would I get the Vx by itself? So in your homework, I'm okay if you went straight to writing Vx right now. On a test, I would probably show that step. So in our notes, let's write Vx equals 50 cos 30. So Dustin, we know what the heck we did. But if you're good enough at dealing with one fraction equals one fraction, and you can go straight to your calculator, go ahead in your homework. I'm fine with that. Uh, 50 cos 30. Oh, whoops, that's not right. 0 cos 30. 50 cos. Do you get 43.301? I'll carry a few extra sig figs because this is nowhere near my final answer. Is that right? Yeah, 43.301. Which trig function could I use to find Vy initial? Sine 30 equals Vy initial. And again, times by 50. I think this one works out dead even to 25, does it not? Yeah. I've got the sine of 30 memorized. It's 0.5 because it shows up so often. So it's half of 50. Mr. Dueck. Yeah, Kiowa. I'm looking at the last question where we launched off the ground up at an angle. Yeah. I noticed Vx was cos and Vy was sine. Yeah. I'm looking at this question where we're launching up at an angle. From a cliff, but up at an angle. Your point? I notice Vx is cos and Vy is sine. Yeah. Will that always be the case? Yeah. As long as you're launching up. If I was a good teacher, I would have some dumb, stupid way for you to remember that Vy is going to be sine. If I was a good teacher, I'm sure I'd have a clever, dumb way for you to remember that Vy is always sine. I have nothing. You have to come up with something on your own. What's Vx? Which trig function? Yeah, of course it is. All right. He coughed during the punchline, so you might have missed it, but you'll get it later. Now, oh, there must, by the way, right now, Clay, how many pieces of information do I have in my horizontal column? How many in my vertical column? I can't solve it. There has to be something else. They're either going to give me a vertical displacement or a horizontal displacement. By the way, if they give me the horizontal displacement, this question is way easier. You won't need the quadratic equation because the a is 0, which means the half at squared is going to cancel, which means it's no longer a quadratic. I'm going to give you one like that in the homework and just say try and figure it out because it's a lot easier. Here, they gave me a vertical displacement. What's my vertical displacement? Don't say 60 because you're wrong. Negative 60. I know t equals vertical because here's where I know three things. And this time I think I remembered to label it part A, yes? So I think I told you guys, I'm not going to be fussy. You do not have to put part A, don't write this down, over here on the left because it's the beginning. As long as you're organized, I would rather have you stay, since we're solving this vertically, in the vertical. Put a box around your answer at the end. I'll find it. I'll figure it out. So I'm going to do part A over here. I'm looking for an equation that has A, Vi, D, and T in it. There is one. Which one? Yeah, read it out. Clay, go ahead. You're on a roll.
Vi, T.
First part as well.
Oh, D equals
Yep.
Vi, T plus a half.
And I'm going to be really, just to emphasize vertical, I'm going to go dy equals Vy initial t plus a half ay t squared. Why am I not putting a y on the time? Because time is a scalar, so what do I care about direction there? Do any of those cancel this time, or any of these zeros this time? No. What that means is this is going to be a full-bore quadratic equation. Negative 60 equals 25t minus 4.9 t squared. Can you all see where the 4.9 came from? What's a? Negative 9 point. What's half of that? Okay. You'll see that number show up so often that, like me, you'll be lazy and just remember that one. And that's the only reason you should memorize stuff, because you're lazy, not because you have to. Oh, by the way, I did my Vy as sine, stupid thing. Again, you'll notice you can figure it out if you do forget. You can memorize that stupid trick if you're lazy, which is, again, the only reason you should memorize something, because it's a shortcut, but you don't have to. You can derive it each time, right? Whew. Okay. What kind of an equation is this? It's a quadratic. How do I know? You know, if I was good, I would have mentioned that at the beginning of the... I did. Excellent. How do I solve a quadratic? Before I do anything else, what do I have to do? Got to make it equal to 0. The easiest way to make this equal to 0 would be to plus the 60 over, but this is just me being me, Jason. I have learned that when my squared term is negative, when a in the quadratic formula is negative, I make stupid mistakes. So I'm actually going to plus the 4.9 over and minus the 25t over, because it's all the same amount of writing, because I'm doing it all in my head anyways. This is just me being me, okay? So I'm going to go like this. 4.9t squared, take away 25t, and then the take away 60 drops down like a domino. And I, unfortunately, am running out of room. I'm going to do something I don't want to do. I'm going to move to the horizontal side just to keep this all on one page. Sorry. Now what? If you have a solver, or if you're very good with the quadratic formula, you could go Do you have to memorize that? No, it's on your formula sheet. Oh, I did put t equals because technically we're solving for t, but if you wrote x equals, I wouldn't freak out, but I'd probably just circle it, put a little frowny face and say, hey, you're finding t dot x, don't get, caught in a rut. And if you have a solver, you could now go straight to the answer. Who has solvers here? Okay, so those of you that have solvers, what are the roots? Wait a minute, I don't have it. Patience. Jason, what'd you get?
I got 6.88.
Give it to me like 5 sig figs because I'm going to use this. Anyone have it to yeah.
6.8814.
8814. What's after the 4?
4, then a 7, so 5.
Thank you. Okay. And then there's always one that's going to be negative.
Yeah, negative 1.7794.
Because I'm checking the negative time anyways. So, going to do that. By the way, that actually does mean something. Here's what, in case you're wondering, what's that negative root telling me? Look at the picture. If instead of moving this way at 30 meters per second, if it was moving this way at 30 meters per second, it would take 1.7 seconds for it to hit the ground if it could somehow go through the ground, through the cliff, and land on the ground. In other words, if you could somehow go back in time, that's how long ago you would have had to have left the ground to end up right there at that height and that speed and that angle. It means something, but hashtag nerd trivia, I'm not going to test you on that. Mr. Dueck, I don't have a solver. Oh. If you had a good teacher, he would have gone on a rant on the first day about the importance of a good Okay. I can't believe it's worse, but it is. Missing a little chunk there?
Just broke.
Just broke? Oh. Now, if you don't have a solver, you can quadratic formula this. Or you have another option. There is one more option. Instead of finding time, you can find that. Because it seems to me with acceleration v initial d, there is an equation that has a v final in it. Find it. And this seems to be the preferred one of my students that don't have quadratic solvers, which is why I'm showing you this. What is the equation that has a v final, a v initial, an a, and the d? No t. Yep. Yep. Do I know vi? Yeah. Oh, by the way, vertical, 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 vertical. Do I know vi? Yep. Do I know a? Yep. Do I know d? Yep. Okay. By the way, how would I get rid of that squared right there? Because this is vy final squared. How do I get rid of squared? So I'm going to be really lazy, and I'm going to go chunk, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to plug and chug. Vy initial 25 squared plus 2 negative 9.8 negative 60. I do what's inside the square root first. 25 squared plus 2 times negative 9.8 times negative 60. Square root of that. And I get Vy final is 42.4382. And this is wrong. For a candy, can anybody see why this is technically wrong? Which is why I said there was one trick you have to remember here. It's so obvious it's tricky. Why would it be negative? When it hits the ground, which way is it traveling? Downwards. This equation, this Vf squared equals Vi squared plus 280, it's actually a scalar equation. It doesn't give you vector answers. So the only thing you have to remember, Clay, if you're going to say, I'm going to find Vy final, is you can, and it's two lines, well, really, yeah, 2 lines, 1 line, but 2 separate little words. It's going to give you a scalar answer. Now, if it does that, then I can say Vy final equals negative 42.4382. I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to say still continued over here. Okay? Let's say part A. And next year I'll leave a whole page. Sorry. Now why does that help? We already used our solver. What did we say? Time equals 6.885. Now that I have Vy final, please tell me, is there an equation that has a t in it, a V final, and a V initial, and a d if I need it, but I don't think I do. Which one? I think the first one, doesn't it? Has V final, which we just figured out. In fact, the first one is probably the one you're the most comfortable with because it's the one we flogged the most last year. In fact, if I say to you, get the t by itself in that first one, most you can do that right now. T equals, what is it, V final minus V initial over A. Is that right? Except Travis, it's vertical, vertical, vertical. Let's see if this gives us the same answer as Jason got on his solver. Negative 42.4382. I'm just going to use my answer button. Minus 25. Was that Vy initial? Vy initial? Vy? Yep. All over negative 9.8. Please tell me, do we also get 6.8815? Bracket, negative answer button, minus 25, divided by negative 9.8. Alex, do I get the same value that I do? Did I have to use the quadratic formula? Nope. So you can use quadratic, full marks. You can do this method, full marks. You can use a solver. I'll only give you full marks if you write down the quadratic formula and con me into thinking that you actually did the quadratic formula, because that's how we used to do it on the provincial, so I keep it that same way. I want you to recognize or prove to me that you knew it was a quadratic. I get this. 1, 4, and then now I'll round to 3 sig figs and put a box around it. What's the time of flight? 6.88 seconds. Whew! Yes?
How would you get the negative?
You won't, but it's irrelevant anyways, because I always mention that when we find that negative root, that technically it does mean something. This method won't give that to you. You'd have to use the quadratic equation for it. Yeah. Although at the same time, this way you only get the time value that you're interested in. So it's in one way, less. By the way, I actually one time I added up the number of lines it took if I was writing every step. I think using the find v final, find time method is 2 extra lines. Quadratic formula, though, depends how good you are. I use the quadratic formula because I have a solver, or I can do it really fast. I got good at it, but at the same time, you don't have to. We okay with that? A answered. This is going to be going in the air for 6.88 seconds. B. B. Travis, what's B asking me to find? Time to what?
To top.
Again, time to what? The word top, would that connote or suggest vertical or horizontal? Now, I've turned the page, so my T-table thing has kind of fallen apart, but I'm going to drop all my vertical data down. I'm going to say to myself, okay, AY equals what? VY initial equals 25. Can I use time here? No, that was time all the way back down to the bottom. And I can't just divide this by 2 because it kept falling after it got back to its original height. It's fallen for longer than it was going up because we're from a cliff. So that trick doesn't work. What else do I know about the top? I don't know. I've never been there. Yeah, that's okay. Oh, VY final. I got to be fussy because VF is not 0. It's still moving horizontally. I can even tell you how fast, 43.301 meters per second. But VY, it'd be wonderful if there was an equation. It would be wonderful. It'd be wonderful. Hey. It'd be wonderful if there was an equation that had VY final, VY initial, and A in it. Is there such an equation? Well, there is. Normally I'd write it out, but since it's sitting right here on the same page, I'm going to go straight to plug it in the numbers. VY final, 0. VY initial, 25. Negative 9.8. 0 minus 25 divided by negative 9.8. 2.55. But you know what? I don't think I'm using this again, so I'm going to go to 3 sig figs right now. 2.55 seconds. I'll put a little box around it because I feel proud. By the way, an extension question I could now ask is, how long is this thing falling for? 6.88 minus 2.55, because if it takes 2.55 seconds to get to the top, the rest is falling down. Would you ever ask that? I never have. Just kind of thought of that now, but we can do lots with this. C. Kevin, what's C asking me to find?
Find the range.
The word range, does that suggest a horizontal or a vertical? Horizontal. Question? Yeah. Nope, you're good. Horizontal, you said?
Yes.
If I was still in the previous page, I would be now under my horizontal column. I'd put a little C and just, I would, but I've turned the page, so I'm just going to drop the data down. Horizontally. Oh, we knew this. Nice. And we knew this was 43.301. Or if you wanted to, you could write 50 cos 30 every time, and that would be exact, because your calculator would just crunch that every time. I'm not that fussy. But if you really want to nitpick, you can. How many pieces of information have I just written? Doesn't do me any good. I need 3. What else do I know? Which time am I going to use? The total time of flight, because that's how long it's traveling sideways for. 6.8814. In fact, I'll draw a little arrow even pointing like that to remind myself that's what I did. And now I want to find that. Is there an equation that has D, A, V, and T in it? Which one? More specific. Read it to me.
D equals V initial T plus.
Stop. Why can't I tell you to stop reading?
Auxiliaries and accelerators.
Then don't waste my time. I'm fine. If you do that, I'm fine. I'll clue in that in your head you say, it's 0. I'm not going to waste ink. I'm good with that. Again, I'm, Nick, really going to try and push you, start doing stuff up here. I think that's healthy. I think that really helps you wrap everything together. Oh, and we got the d by itself. This is plug and chug. It's going to be 43.301 times 6.88145. Dope. 297.9, you know what? 298 to 3 sig figs. Units. Centimeters? Who said that? Meters. I'll put a box around it. Again, do you have to put a box around your answer? No, it makes it easier for me to find it. Putting a box around the answer after I've done a long question, that's the equivalent of when they score a touchdown and they spike the football. Like, that's my mental, ta-da, got it, shut up, I'm right. Kind of. So I do it. What else can I ask you? D is nasty. D is nasty. It's nasty enough, in fact, that I'm going to come back to it. Instead, I'm going to go to example 11. Okay. Example 11. Is there a projectile? Everybody say yes.
Yes.
Is there a cliff? Is there an angle? Ugh. It'll be longer. Now here, I said find the flight time and find the range. I think on the test I would simply give you this picture and I would just say find the range. Because you can't find the range without finding the time of flight. Probably. But I said both. All right. Help me out. What am I going to do? How am I going to start? G-table? Yeah, I'm going to do that. This time I left you guys a whole page, yeah?
Yep.
Whew. A little smarter. Horizontal, vertical. Oh, there's two things I'm going to write without even thinking. AX equals 0. AY equals negative 9.8. Is there a slanty velocity? Well, then I'm looking for a word that begins with the letter C and rhymes with components. I'm going to break this into components, horizontal and vertical. I bet you the horizontal is going to be cos. I bet you the vertical is going to be Vy, is going to be sine. Let's just confirm it, though. And then if it does work, you can maybe use that in your homework. On a test, I'd probably still derive it, but if you want a shortcut, there it is, right? So I'm going to go d d d d d d d d d. There's Vx. D d d d d d d d d. There's... Okay, you know what? You guys can label your diagram just so you can see better. I'm going to go like this so that I can make a nice big diagram because the way I was writing, I was running into those numbers. So there's Vx, there's Vy initial, and here's the 35, 20 degrees. Why did I put an initial on the Vy but not on the Vx? Okay, any chance I can get to reinforcement. Okay. Hypotenuse, adjacent, opposite. Hey, which trig function would find Vx? Of course it does. Okay, so we're going to end up with cos 20 equals Vx over 35. So, you know what? I'm going to go straight here. Vx equals, because how would I get the Vx by itself? I would times by 35. I'm going to go 35 cos 20. I'll go 32.889. Mr. Dueck, you said that you wanted us to round everything to 2 or 3 sig figs. No, I did say I wanted you to round your final answers to 2 or 3 sig figs. Are we going to use this to find other stuff? Then keep some extra sig figs. And I'm pretty sure that sine 20 ends up being Vy initial over 35. I'm pretty sure that if I times by 35 times by 35, it ends up being 35 sine 20. And I get 11.9707. How many things do I have in the left column? 2. How many things do I have in the right column? 2. Can't do it, not enough. There must be something else. Oh, there is. The picture told me one more thing. So what am I going to write? Vertical or horizontal? What is the vertical displacement? Careful. Negative. So that means I'm going to find time vertically. Now, if you have a quadratic you know what? Let's vote. Who wants me to do this using the quadratic? 1, 2, 3, 4. Who would prefer to find V final and then use that to find T? Really? Usually it's overwhelming the other way around. Sorry, Travis. We're using the quadratic formula. I'm going to have to do it the long way then. If you got a solver, you can take shortcuts, but I'm going to crunch it all the way through with A's and B's and C's and the whole schmear. Okay. I'm looking for an equation that has D, A, V, and T in it. There is one. Not like we haven't seen this puppy before, right? Are any of these 0? Nope. They would be 0 if we were launching horizontally, because Vy initial would be 0, which makes the equation nicer. Negative 20 equals 11.9707 t minus 4.9. Where'd that 4 Oh yeah, t squared. Dale, I'm going to plus the 4.9 t squared, and I'm going to minus the 11.9707 t over. I'm going to get 4.9 t squared minus 11.9707 t minus 20 equals nothing. How much room have I got to play with? Oh, lots of room. Just got to extend this line a little bit. T equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where that's a, that's b, and that's c. I told you that's my labeling strategy. You can rewrite it. You can actually write a equals and b equals. Go ahead. T equals positive 11.9707, because it's negative negative, which is a positive, plus or minus the square root of negative 11.9707 squared minus 4 times 4.9 times negative 20 all over. Ha! 2 times 4.9, 9.8. Hey, there's G again. Now what did I say? Oh, is that a question? Sorry? Quick look at money. Now what? I told you I evaluate what's inside the square root first. So I'm actually going to go bracket negative 11.9707 close bracket squared minus 4 times 4.9 times negative 20. Inside the square root is that there thing. So this ends up being t equals plus positive 11.9707 plus or minus the square root of 535.298. All over 9.8. One answer is going to be bracket 11.9707 plus the square root of 535.298. Mr. Dueck, why don't you just use your answer button? Well, the problem is if I put my answer button there and then I backspace and reuse my answer button, there's going to be a new answer inside the answer button and give me the wrong answer for the second one. You guys wanted to do it this way. Okay. Close off the square root, close off the top, divided by 9.8. Those of you that have solvers, did you guys get 3.58? And the 2 might match you guys, but I bet the 3 and the 6 might be different. Or, yeah? What'd you get to 5 sig figs?
I got 3.58,
236 or 37?
2367.
So, can you round off properly? We're in grade 12. And what'd you get? 3.58, 237. Okay. So you know what? We're both, me carrying about 5 or 6 sig figs has given me accuracy to 5 or 6 sig figs. We're good enough. So I'm going to write down T equals, I'll write down a bunch, 3.58237. And then I'll put an equal sign. And to 3 sig figs, 3.58, there's the units, seconds, put a box, touchdown. Yay, that's A. What does B want us to find? Range? Oh, that's always easier. I'm going to go hopping over to here. That's going to be horizontal. That's going to be finding dx. What else can I now move to this column? What else do I now know horizontally? I heard someone say it. You're right. What was it? Time. T equals, if you want to draw an arrow pointing there like that, you can. I won't this time because I'm so far down. 3.58237. 3.58237. Have you noticed the pattern for the range? I'm looking for an equation that has a d, an a, a v. You know what? It's always going to be d equals vit plus a half at squared. But what's a horizontally? Have you noticed that for the range, it's always been dx equals just vxt, which is really nice. Which is why, by the way, if I gave you this same question here, and instead of giving you the height, if I gave you the range, you would go like this. How would you get the t by itself? Just divide, and you're done. No quadratic formula. No, that's why I also said once you have the time, it tends to fall apart. It's finding that we spend most of our time finding time. It's going to be 32.889 times 3.58237. I'm going to use my answer button. 32.889 times. You guys get a range of 118 meters, 118 meters to 3 sig figs. How many lines to find time? All this stuff over here on the right, but once you have time, it falls apart. Because how many lines to find the distance? 2. We're going to spend most of our time finding time. Cliff at an angle, the toughest. But I'm going to ask you one of them on the test as a written question. Mr. Dueck, why did you skip D? Let's go back. Mitchell, what's D asking me to find? The impact. Now, I have to use my imagination, but I'm pretty sure when it hits the ground, the impact velocity is going to be slanty downwards. You okay with that? I'm going to gulp. D says find the impact velocity. I think it looks like that. Draw a nice big line. Is it slanty? Yeah? So when it's slanty, what word pops to your mind that begins with the letter C? Now this time, because it's pointing downwards, I'm going to draw my components above. There's Vx. There's Vy. Look up for a second. Why did I do that? Why did I put an F on Vy? That's the velocity, that's the vertical component that it's hitting the ground at. Now, a lot of kids want to say, isn't v final 0? That's after impact, Captain Obvious. I'm not going to ask you that. I mean, right at impact. Do I know any of these? Hey, I know Vx, because Vx never changes. So from this question, can you go back in our T-chart? What was Vx? 43 point. Is that right from this question? Yeah, 43.301. What's Vy final? Hey, Mr. Dueck. That alternative method that you used, where we didn't use the quadratic formula, where we just found, you know what? That's Vy final. We have it sitting there. What's the negative telling me? It's pointing. Which way is it pointing in the picture that we just drew? Hey, we're good. So I'm going to put 42.4382. 42.4382. Is that right? 42.4382. Yeah, that's right. Now, the actual impact velocity they want me to find is that one. Hey, that's a resultant. I would add Vx and Vy final together. How? How would I draw them? Already did. Complete with a lovely right angle there, so this is not going to be sine law, cosine law. How could I find the magnitude of the impact velocity? How big that line is? Math 8. Pythagoras. And then which angle? Always where the vector starts from. There. Okay, let's do the Pythagoras. So we're going to say V impact squared equals 43.301 squared plus 42.4382 squared. Mr. Dueck, I thought V final was negative. I've got the negative in the arrow pointing down. That's what contains the negative. If you put a negative and you had an arrow pointing down, you'd be saying it was negative down. What would negative down be? Up, yes, not up. So just, you know. 43.301 squared plus 42.4382 squared, square root. How fast is it traveling when it hits the ground? 60.6 meters per second. At, because they said impact velocity, not impact speed. And impact velocity means vector, magnitude, and direction. This Vy final, opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Opposite. This Vx, adjacent. Which trig function? Tan? Really? Yeah? Well, let's do that again. So over here, we have tan theta. By the way, 43.3, 42.4 are so close together, I'm betting this is almost going to be bang on a 45-degree angle, because this is almost an isosceles triangle. I bet you it's going to be like 43, 44, 45, or 46 degrees, somewhere in there. Opposite. Over adjacent. Opposite. Over adjacent. 44.4, is that what someone said? Yep. .4 degrees. What of what? Well, we got a problem. Question? If you said south of east, I'd take it. But you know what? That's not south, and that's not north. Down is not south. On your paper, when we're doing a map, we typically have down the page be south. But that's a top view. Our picture's a side view. So if you did say, Kyle, south of east, I give you marks, but I'd put a little frowny face next to it. How do we describe this? We would say that this is below the horizontal. We say if you draw a horizontal line, Nick, the angle that we found is below the horizontal. As opposed to if you wanted to describe the direction of this 30 degrees, you would say not 30 degrees north of east, you would say it's launched at an angle of 30 degrees above the horizontal. That's a tough question right there. Especially if you haven't walked through part A, part B, especially if they just say, hey, find the impact velocity. Well, I got to find the total time, either quadratic formula or Vy final. I've got to find all the components. There's a lot to that. I've thrown a lot at you. Believe it or not, we're done the unit. All we're going to be doing for the next lessons is looking at weird and tougher examples. But if I've done my job right, each time I come to them, hopefully, when we work through it, you'll say, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's obvious in hindsight. I hope. That's my goal. For now, what's your homework? Number 1 I already assigned. Can you look at number 2 for a second? There's a typo. So my friend, a teacher that I know, he's now a prof at Quantland, very good physics teacher. He actually typed up these notes, and I've modified them over the years, but I bought his book from him to use it as my starting point. He typed these up in, I kid you not, Word 95 for Mac. What year are we now? The graphics are starting to show their age, so someone noticed this summer. For some reason, this theta jumped. It should be there because it should be a right angle right there. So can you make sure that that theta's in there? I don't know why it moved over, and I'm going to fix it next summer. Number 2. Hey, you can now handle cliff at an angle? Am I explaining the homework? No. Patience, young grasshopper. See if you can figure out number 4. I gave you the answer, and why those are the answers are. Number 5 is very difficult. See if you can get that one. That's in number 3, and number 3 is the cliff, yes? Number 6 is talking about off the ground. I'm not going to worry about number 6. 7 and 8, maybe not. Number 9. Number 10. Number 11. And 13. That gives you a wide range. Most of them are what I would call B+ level questions. There's a couple of A- A level questions. There's a couple of CC+ levels. Okay? You have the remainder of class to work on this. This is a big chunk of stuff. I don't think you'll be able to fit it on this assignment unless you write incredibly small. You can attach stuff to this if you want, or you can do some on this assignment and some on a piece of paper. You might want to answer the diagram questions on this assignment. I'm fine with that. Whatever works for you. Okay?